Hello and welcome to Nat's Chat. Thanks for joining me, and for those that are new, welcome. So this is part 2 of my expose on the Minister for Policing, Chris Philp. Part 1 is on my Patreon account, for those that already know. And today I'm giving you a follow-up, and it's a part 2. So let me recap for those that haven't listened to part 1. Philp, in short, Chris Philp, the Tory Minister for Policing, likes to visit, and let me just get straight to it, darlings, likes to visit a particular website called sleepyboy.com. My source, a male escort that works on the site, he had contacted me having found out that Philp was a Tory politician. Philp was being a bit careless, and that's another day, another story. So for clarity, I've known my source for many, many years. So it wasn't a random individual that came to me with the going-ons of Philp. Right, so you're probably thinking, well, what's the point of part 2? I'll tell you why. First of all, the questions are going to be, well, okay, Chris Philp goes on a website hunting down, male escorts for his personal pleasure. And you're probably asking, well, why is that even part of the public interest? Well, I'll tell you why it is. Philp is a government minister. And yes, people have a right to a private life. But I'm here to tell you why this is important. Philp is a Tory government minister for policing, a married man with children and potentially a black male risk. What I'm trying to say right now is that, okay, we've all got that on Patreon, my Patreon account, but what the reason why I'm doing this one right now is this part 2 and what happened and how the story has not gone mainstream. And let me also add that Chris Philp is a hypocrite. He's made comments in the past regarding the LGBTQ community that was totally negative, while he himself clearly has an attraction to the same sex as himself. Right, so without further ado, let me just give you part 2 and the update and what the hell went on and why the story has not entered the mainstream. But you've got me. So when my source approached me and told me what was going on, and he would regale other clients, but this one was of particular interest to me. I then went to a freelance journalist who I've been to in the past, who kind of brokers stories for me, because sometimes my name won't be put behind the story, especially when it comes to certain papers like the Mail, which I didn't want to go to, but here's what happened. My first instinct was to go to the Mirror, but I wanted her to do it, and keep me as a buffer as far as the story is concerned, until, the deal was going to be signed for my source, for payment, etc. What happened is that she convinced me that I should go to the Mail. And I was like, oh, this is not a natural place for a Tory scandal. But she said, no, they're going to love this story, Natalie, blah, blah, bloody blah. So she approached a journalist at the Mail, who I actually had known in the past when I was reasonably on friendly terms with that paper many years ago. So when he then contacted me, because this other journalist, who I won't be naming who these journalists are, as I'm not going to be naming my source for, until necessary, and I'm given permission. Anyway, so the journalist goes to the Mail journalist, and in quick fashion, he then called me up, wanting to meet with my source. I thought, fantastic, but I wanted to make sure that they were absolutely serious about doing the story. And yeah, he convinced me, and I believed him against my better judgment. So I gave him the journalist at the Mail, I gave him a brief detail of what was going on with Chris Philp, but of course he had to meet with the source. So the journalist and my source, the male escort that Chris Philp was engaging with intimately, paying him for, and let's not beat around the bush, for sex. They had a conversation, journalist and my source had a full-on conversation. Journalist took down every detail, of what had gone on, and whatever proof my source had was ready to be furnished and was furnished. And I thought, brilliant. I can't believe it. The Mail are going to run this story, despite my initial instincts that it wasn't the right place for them to, it wasn't the right place for the story to be placed. But there we are. And then, after my source has given the Mail, quelle surprise, all the details, the journalist calls and says, and this is where it got really ridiculous. So apparently, the journalist had, I was going to say close family member, but I'm just going to keep it straight here. He said that his mother had fallen down the stairs and had also contracted COVID. Now, I'm not going to argue with somebody that's telling you something so drastic about their own mother. It did cross my mind. Is this male journalist so lethally devious that he would make such a story up? But I had to give him the benefit of the doubt. But then what happens is that he's now put it on hold, having got the whole story from my source, has everything that he needs. And I now know why he did it. Listen, I don't believe first of all, a journalist, if they are incapable and can't go to see the source again to seal the deal, contract-wise, etc., you know what they do if it's a big, huge story, as this was? They would then give another journalist the story to cover until they are able to get back on it themselves. So it absolutely dawned on me very quickly. The Mail didn't ever want to do the story. What they wanted to do was get the story, keep it on hold as long as they possibly could, and that no one else would have it. Of course, I should have gone to the Mirror, but I had to, I've got my issues with those papers at the moment. And the Sun, but I do believe that the Sun, had I gone to the Sun, they would have run that story. Anyway, my source then gets very, very anxious. He was anxious before, and he only did it and wanted to put out the story because A, he would be paid, and B, it was of public interest, and he trusted me. So when that happened, he got very nervous, my source, very nervous, thinking, he started to get a little bit paranoid, thinking, well, I've got the story now, what's going to happen to me? Are they going to come for me? Am I safe? And I tried to reassure him, darling, you've never exposed the Tories like I have, and I think you're pretty safe. But it gave him the wobbles, and so the story never went mainstream. And even though the story hasn't gone mainstream, as I've said before, you do have me, darlings. And you know something? I think it will end up being mainstream at some point. And if it doesn't, it doesn't matter. I've got enough followers. I've got enough exposure. I'm going to tell you what the mainstream media won't want to tell you for their own selfish political reasons. But I'll tell you what it is that's really perturbing here is that Chris Philp is now a puppet. He's a sitting duck. And when I said earlier that he's open to blackmail, I'll tell you who he's open to blackmail by. The press. The right-wing press. Because he now knows that they have his little story in black and white, having spoken to my source. They know the story. They've seen the evidence. So what are they holding on to it for? I'll tell you what. He can now have to dance to their tune. I must say, though, he's been a bit quiet lately because he was out and about doing Rishi Sunak's job and talking at a long time. To the point where he's becoming a meme. But I will tell you this, is that Rishi Sunak is very, very, very much aware of this sex scandal, Tory minister Chris Philp, going on sleepyboy.com, trawling for young boys to have sex with, while married, with children. Sunak cannot pretend he doesn't know, because I've been at him personally on Twitter, now called X, many times. I'm just grateful that I have enough of a following that even if it doesn't go into mainstream media, that the word will go around. And once you guys have listened to this, you at Chris Philp and you at Rishi Sunak and you ask them, what are you going to do about this? Is this true? Have you got a comment? What I also forgot to mention, just come to me, is that the male escort lives in Croydon. Obviously, I'm not going to give you his name and identity, etc. But he lives in Croydon, and Chris Philp is the MP for Croydon. So I can only presume that he, for convenience, just, searched out an individual on the sleepyboy.com website for male escorts that was close to his, he's probably in Croydon on the day, or it's more convenient as he's a married man. There is more to this story, which I won't go into because I have to be careful about not revealing the identity of my source. But he does live in Croydon. He is a constituent of Chris Philp, who is the MP for Croydon. And as I said, Rishi Sunak is very much aware of Chris Philp's behaviour. But you've got to remember that Rishi Sunak has a form for covering up for, MPs that you may not want to represent you. And you got to remember, the Tories have the highest number of MPs that have gone to jail, that are under investigation for rape, for sexual assault, for sexual abuse. And I am not accusing Chris Philp of any of those things, but what I am saying is this. As far as I'm aware, unless Rishi Sunak's going to change the law tomorrow, soliciting for sex online or offline is still illegal. And we have the Minister for Policing, darlings, who is meant to be upholding the law, is committing what is at the moment a crime. I am not saying I agree, because I clearly would be a hypocrite if I said it, that men should not be allowed to pay for sex. But as it still, right now as we speak, illegal to troll a website to procure a male or a female with the intentions to pay for sex is still illegal. And Chris Philp needs to step down as the Minister for Policing. But as long as you've got Rishi Sunak, who loves all that seediness, and by goodness me, he's got his own secrets, go into that another day, then where do we stand? So here we are. I am not against anybody paying for sex. That is not the issue here. The issue here is the hypocrisy. And by the way, you've got Chris Philp on record having sided with Boris Johnson, who referred to gay men as tank top bum boys. Chris Philp is on record saying he has nothing to do with the LGBTQ community. And here he is, on sites, married man, with children, paying for sex with a man. So in essence, to be honest with you, my part two is really about the cover-up by the press, or the Mail in particular. I've learnt my lesson, and I should have known it, because I've been down this road before with the John Whittingdale, Google him and his Dominique Trix story. That's the story for another day. But what I will say to you now is that if it never gets into the mainstream, spread the word, darlings. And thank you so much. I appreciate you listening. Thanks for listening to Nat's Chat, and I will be back again soon. Love you all. Take care. Stay safe. I will be back, because you know what? There's always a Tory political scandal waiting around the corner, and if there is, your girl's going to let you know about it. Bye, darlings.